The grand concourse of the Galactic Assembly Station stretched for kilometers, its crystalline domes reflecting the light of distant stars. At this hour, station midnight, the halls lay empty except for one figure pushing a maintenance cart across the polished marble floors. Kang Doyen was 52 years old and had been working the night shift for 3 years now. The former schoolteacher from Busan never imagined he would end up cleaning floors on an alien space station. But humanity's entry into galactic society had created strange opportunities. The pay was decent, the work simple, and most importantly, it let him send money back to his daughter Hannah and his grandchildren on Earth. The aliens rarely noticed him. He had learned to move through the station like a ghost, appearing when messes needed cleaning and vanishing just as quickly. After decades in classrooms full of energetic children, the quiet solitude felt peaceful. That peace shattered when he heard the crying. Doyen stopped, his mop dripping water onto the floor. The sound came from one of the ceremonial corridors, a hall reserved for diplomatic functions and rarely used at night. He should not investigate. His supervisor had made it clear that janitors stayed in designated areas and avoided getting involved in station business. But that sound was a child crying. Years of teaching instinct overrode his caution. Doyen left his cart and followed the soft, hiccuping sobs down the corridor. There, beneath a towering statue of some ancient alien philosopher, sat a small figure in elaborate robes. The child could not have been more than 8 years old in human terms. His skin shimmered with a blue color like pearls, and large golden eyes, currently filled with tears, dominated his small face. Four delicate fingers clutched at shoes that had come completely undone, their laces trailing across the floor in a tangled mess. Doyen's heart clenched. Alien or not, a crying child was a crying child. "Hello," he said softly in Galactic Common, his translator device rendering the words into a language the child might understand. "Are you all right?" The child looked up, startled. Tears streaked down his face and his lower lip trembled. He said something in a language Doyen's translator struggled with, then pointed helplessly at his shoes. Doyen knelt down, his old knees protesting slightly. Up close, he could see the shoes were ceremonial, intricate things with multiple laces and clasps designed in patterns he did not recognize. They looked impossibly complicated, and the child had clearly been struggling with them for some time. "May I help?" Doyen asked gently, the same tone he had used with countless first graders struggling with their own shoelaces. The child hesitated, then nodded, fresh tears spilling over. Doyen examined the shoes carefully. Despite their alien design, the basic principle seemed similar enough to Earth footwear. He began untangling the laces, working slowly and carefully. "It is all right," he murmured. "Everyone needs help sometimes. Even with something as simple as shoes." The child watched him with those enormous golden eyes, his crying gradually subsiding into quiet sniffles. "When my daughter was little," Doyen continued, his voice conversational, "she would get so frustrated with her shoes. She would cry just like you. So I taught her a trick. We made a story about the laces. Would you like to learn?" The child nodded, seemingly mesmerized by Doyen's calm manner. "First we make 2 loops like rabbit ears, see?" Doyen demonstrated with the alien laces. "Then the rabbits run around each other and—" He pulled the knot tight. "They're friends now. 1 shoe done." A small sound escaped the child, not quite a laugh but close. Doyen smiled and reached for the second shoe. That was when he heard the footsteps. They echoed through the corridor with military precision, many footsteps, moving fast. Doyen looked up just as a squad of armed guards rounded the corner, their weapons raised. Behind them walked a tall figure whose presence seemed to fill the entire hallway. The Emperor of the Velian Dominion stood nearly 7 feet tall, his scales a deeper, richer blue than his son's. A crown of crystalline spikes rose from his head, and his robes, far more elaborate than the child's, seemed to shimmer with their own inner light. His eyes, the same golden shade as the boy's, fixed on Doyen with an intensity that made the janitor's breath catch. The guards shouted commands, but Doyen's translator could not keep up with their rapid speech. He understood the weapons pointed at him well enough, though. Slowly, carefully, Doyen raised his hands and stood. The second shoe remained untied. The Emperor walked forward, and the guards parted like water before him. He stopped 3 paces away, his gaze moving from Doyen to his son, then down to the partially tied shoes. For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. Then the child, the Prince Doyen realized with growing dread, spoke up in his high, clear voice. He pointed at Doyen and spoke rapidly in his own language, his golden eyes earnest. The Emperor's expression remained unreadable. He looked at Doyen again, studying him with an intensity that made the janitor want to shrink away. Instead, Doyen met his gaze steadily. He had not done anything wrong. He had just helped the child. Finally, the emperor spoke, his voice deep and resonant. The translator rendered his words clearly, "You touched my son." It was not a question. It was a statement that hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Doyen swallowed hard. "Yes, your majesty." He was crying. His shoes had come undone and he could not tie them. "I was just helping him." "Just helping," the emperor repeated, his tone impossible to read. "I meant no disrespect," Doyen continued, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Where I come from, when a child is upset, you help them. It does not matter who they are. It does not matter who you are. You just help." The emperor stared at him for another long moment. Then unexpectedly he looked down at his son. "Is this true, Taemin?" The prince nodded vigorously and spoke again, gesturing between Doyen and his shoes. Whatever he said made the emperor's eyes widen slightly. The ruler of the Velian dominion turned back to Doyen, and something in his expression had shifted. "My son says you were teaching him. Not just fixing his shoes but teaching him how to do it himself." "Yes," Doyen said simply. "A man should know how to tie his own shoes." A strange sound came from the emperor. It might have been a laugh, though it was hard to tell. He looked at his son again, then at the untied shoe, then back at Doyen. "Finish," the emperor said. "Your majesty?" "Finish the lesson." It was a command, but spoken without harshness. "Show my son how to tie his second shoe." Doyen hesitated, acutely aware of the weapons still trained on him. But the emperor had given a direct order. Slowly he knelt again beside Prince Taemin. The child's face lit up with a shy smile. "All right," Doyen said softly, picking up the laces of the second shoe. "Remember the rabbit ears?" Taemin nodded eagerly. His small fingers moved to mirror Doyen's hands, trying to follow along. "Good. Now watch carefully. The rabbits go around each other like a dance." Doyen guided the child's fingers gently, helping him form the loops and pull them through. "And pull tight. There. You did it." Taemin looked down at his now tied shoes with such pure joy that Doyen could not help but smile. The prince said something in his own language, then carefully tried to repeat the motion, his fingers working through the pattern Doyen had shown him. "Very good," Doyen praised. "With practice you will be able to do it with your eyes closed." "Remarkable," the emperor said quietly. Doyen stood again, brushing off his worn uniform pants. The emperor was still watching him with that penetrating gaze, but the hostility had faded, replaced by something Doyen could not quite identify. Curiosity, perhaps. "You are human," the emperor stated. "From Earth." "Yes, your majesty." Kong Doyen, Maintenance Division. He gave a slight bow, uncertain of the proper protocol. "And what were you before you cleaned floors on this station, Kong Doyen?" "I was a teacher. Elementary school back in Busan." Something flickered across the emperor's face. "A teacher." He looked at his son again, who was still examining his shoes with wonder. "That explains much." The emperor waved his hand and the guards finally lowered their weapons. The tension in the corridor eased, though not completely. "In our culture," the emperor said slowly, "to touch a member of the royal family without permission is a grave offense. To presume to teach a prince as though he were a common child." He paused. "Some of my advisors would call for your execution." Doyen's mouth went dry, but he kept his voice steady. "I understand, your majesty. I apologize if I caused offense. But I would do it again." The emperor's eyes widened. "You would?" "He is a child," Doyen said simply. He was crying. "I have grandchildren about his age back on Earth. When a child is upset, you help them. Status does not matter. Species does not matter. Only the child matters." The emperor studied him in silence. Around them, the guards shifted uncomfortably, clearly uncertain how to interpret this exchange. Finally, the emperor knelt down beside his son, a gesture that made several guards gasp. He spoke to Taemin in their own language, his voice gentle. The prince responded animatedly, his small hands gesturing as he explained something. When the emperor stood, his expression had transformed completely. There was sadness there and something that might have been shame. "My son tells me," he said quietly, "that he has been trying to tie his shoes for 3 days. The servants always do it for him, but he wanted to learn to do it himself. They refused, saying it was beneath a prince to perform such tasks." The emperor's jaw tightened. "When he tried on his own and failed, he ran here to hide his tears, afraid that crying would disappoint me." Understanding dawned on Doyen. "Your majesty." "You did not see a prince," the emperor continued, his voice heavy with emotion. "You saw a child who needed help and you gave it without hesitation. without considering status or protocol or consequence. You simply helped. Any decent person would have done the same. Would they? The emperor's laugh was bitter. I have 1,000 courtiers, Kang Doyen. Nobles, advisors, servants, warriors. Not one of them would have knelt in the dust to help my son with something so beneath their station. Not one of them would have taught him when they could have simply done it for him and moved on. The emperor placed a hand on his son's shoulder. You gave him more than knowledge of shoelacing. You gave him dignity. You treated him as a person worth teaching, not just a symbol to be served. Doyen did not know what to say to that. The moment felt too large, too significant for his simple words. I owe you a debt, the emperor said formally. Ask, and if it is within my power, it shall be granted. There is no debt, your majesty. I did not do anything that requires. Ask. The word was gentle but firm. Doyen thought of his daughter, of his grandchildren, of the small apartment back on Earth. But when he spoke, different words came out. Teach him more. The emperor blinked. What? Your son, your majesty. He wants to learn. Not just about shoes but about being himself. Not just a prince but a person. Doyen glanced down at Tamine, who was watching him with those enormous eyes. Let him learn to do things for himself. Small things, everyday things. It will make him a better leader someday. The emperor stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Wisdom from an unexpected source. Very well, Kang Doyen. Your request is granted. He paused. But the debt remains. My son would like to thank you properly. Will you join us for a meal? Every instinct told Doyen to politely decline. He was a janitor. They were royalty. This was not his world. But Tamine was looking up at him hopefully, and Doyen remembered his own grandchildren, and how their faces lit up when he visited. I would be honored, your majesty. The private dining chamber was smaller than Doyen had expected, though still far grander than anywhere he had ever eaten. A long table of dark wood or something like wood dominated the room, and the walls were covered in tapestries depicting scenes he did not recognize. Doyen felt acutely out of place in his stained janitor's uniform, but the emperor had insisted he come as he was. Now he sat at that magnificent table, trying not to touch anything expensive, while servants brought dishes of foods he could not identify. Relax, Kang Doyen, the emperor said, a hint of amusement in his voice. You are my guest. No one here will judge you. Across the table, Prince Tamine watched Doyen with unconcealed fascination, occasionally saying something to his father in their own language. My son wants to know about Earth, the emperor translated. He has never met a human before. What would he like to know? Everything. The emperor smiled, a genuine expression that softened his severe features. He asks if humans also wear complicated shoes. If Earth children also cry when frustrated. If your grandchildren are troublemakers like he is. Doyen laughed. Yes to all three. My grandson Jiho is 8 and my granddaughter Minji is 6. They are full of energy and questions and chaos. He looked at Tamine. Just like every child should be. As the meal progressed, Doyen found himself relaxing despite the surreal circumstances. The emperor, who finally introduced himself as Velkin, proved to be thoughtful and genuinely curious. He asked about Doyen's teaching career, about human child rearing practices, about Earth's culture and customs. You speak of your grandchildren with great warmth, Velkin observed. But you are here light years away. Does that not trouble you? Every day, Doyen admitted. But the money I send home helps my daughter Hannah. She is raising them alone after her husband passed. This job is not what I imagined for my later years, but it serves a purpose. A man who sacrifices proximity to family for their well-being, Velkin said quietly. That is nobility of a kind my court would not recognize. The meal ended with Tamine demonstrating his new shoe-tying skills, proudly showing his father each step of the process. The emperor watched with an expression Doyen recognized, a parent's pride mixed with the bittersweet awareness of time passing. When Doyen finally prepared to leave, Velkin walked him to the door personally, another breach of protocol that made the guards uncomfortable. This conversation has been illuminating, the emperor said. I see now how much my son has been isolated by the very traditions meant to protect him. You have given me much to consider, Kang Doyen. I just talked about my family, your majesty. You showed me what I have been denying my son. Normalcy. Connection. The simple dignity of learning to do things for oneself. Velkin placed a hand on Doyen's shoulder, a gesture that made two guards actually gasp. You will visit again. Not as a summons, but as, I believe humans call it, friendship? Doyen did not know what to say. An emperor offering friendship to a janitor? But looking into Velkin's eyes, he saw only sincerity. "I would like that, Your Majesty." The next day the station buzzed with rumors. "Did you hear? The Emperor of the Velians had dinner with a human janitor." "Impossible. It must be a misunderstanding. I saw them." The Emperor walked him to the door. Personally, Doyen tried to ignore the whispers and stares as he went about his work. His supervisor, a nervous alien named Clicks, called him into the office 3 times that day, alternating between congratulating him and warning him not to cause political complications. "Just do your job," Clicks finally said, his 3 eyes blinking in distress. "Clean floors. Do not touch any more alien royalty. Please." But word had spread beyond just station gossip. 2 days later, Doyen received a message on his personal communicator, an invitation to visit the Velian royal quarters again. Then another the following week. And another. The visits became a regular occurrence. Sometimes formal dinners, sometimes just tea while Tamine practiced his shoe tying or asked endless questions about Earth. Velkin would sit and listen, occasionally asking his own questions, clearly trying to understand a perspective foreign to his upbringing. "In your schools," Velkin asked one evening, "the children of laborers and the children of leaders learn together?" "Of course," Doyen said. "Education is for everyone. Some families have more money than others, but in the classroom, every child is equal." Velkin absorbed this thoughtfully. "And this does not cause conflict? The children of power do not demand special treatment. They are children, Your Majesty. They just want to play and learn and be with their friends. Status is something adults teach them, not something they are born knowing." "Something adults teach them," Velkin repeated softly. "Yes, I see." But not everyone saw things so clearly. Doyen started noticing the cold stares from certain diplomatic delegations, the way some aliens would deliberately avoid him in the corridors. His fellow human workers were divided. Some were proud that one of their own had befriended an emperor, others nervous about the attention it brought. Then came the threats. The first was just graffiti on his locker. "Human trash, go home." The second was a message left in his quarters. "You poison the natural order." The third was more direct. Someone tried to sabotage his maintenance cart, rigging it to cause an electrical shock. Station security investigated, but the culprits were never found. Doyen reported each incident but tried not to let it affect his routine. He had faced worse as a teacher: angry parents, budget cuts, the occasional aggressive drunk outside the school. He could handle this. What he could not handle was Tamine's face when he learned about the threats. "People want to hurt you because of me?" the young prince asked, his golden eyes brimming with tears, the same tears Doyen had first encountered in that corridor. "Not because of you," Doyen said gently. "Because some people do not like change. They are comfortable with the way things are, even if the way things are is not always fair. But you are my friend. You taught me important things. Why would that make people angry?" It was Velkin who answered, kneeling beside his son. "Because, Tamine, there are those who believe that princes should only learn from other princes. That leaders should only associate with other leaders. They think your friendship with Kang Doyen disrupts the proper order of things. But that is stupid." Tamine protested. "Yes," his father agreed quietly. "It is. And that is why we must be brave enough to change it." The Emperor looked at Doyen. "I will not let you come to harm because of your kindness. I am assigning guards." "No," Doyen interrupted, then quickly added, "Your Majesty. With respect, that would only make things worse. It would look like you are protecting me because I am important to your political image, not because, well, because we are friends." "Then what do you suggest?" Doyen thought about it. "We continue as we have been. We do not hide our friendship, but we do not flaunt it either. And if the threats escalate, station security can handle it." But Velkin's expression had darkened. "You underestimate the danger, Kang Doyen. There are factions within my own court who see your influence on my son as corrupting. They whisper that I am becoming weak, that I am forgetting our traditions." "Are you?" Doyen asked quietly. "Forgetting your traditions?" "I am questioning them," Velkin admitted. "Which is perhaps more dangerous." 3 weeks later, station security uncovered an actual plot. Not just threats, but a detailed plan to kill Doyen during his night shift. The conspirators were a mix of Velian traditionalists and members of other species who saw human influence as a threat to the galactic order. They planned to make it look like an accident, Security Chief Dara, a stern Caraxian female, explained. "An equipment malfunction in one of the recycling chambers. You would have been incinerated before anyone found you." Doyen sat in the security office trying to process this. Someone had actually planned his murder. Not in abstract, not as angry graffiti, but as a detailed operational plan. We have arrested the primary conspirators, Dara continued, but there is evidence the conspiracy goes deeper. We are recommending you be relocated to Earth for your safety. No, Mr. Kong. If I leave, it proves them right. It shows that a human being friends with a Velian emperor is so unnatural, so wrong, that it cannot be allowed to continue. Doyen shook his head. I will not give them that satisfaction. Then you are a fool, Dara said bluntly. A brave fool, but a fool nonetheless. Maybe he was. But that evening, when Taemin asked him if he was leaving, Doyen could not bring himself to say yes. The boy had already lost so much to the demands of protocol and status. He would not lose this too. Velkin, however, was less accepting. This has gone too far, the Emperor said, pacing his private quarters. I will not allow your death to be the price of my son's education. Then what do you propose? I make a public statement. A formal recognition of your actions, your friendship with my family. I show the galaxy that I stand by my choices. That will make the situation worse, Your Majesty. It will look like you are being controlled by a human, manipulated into abandoning your culture. I am not being manipulated. Velkin's voice rose. I am making conscious choices about what kind of leader I want to be, what kind of father I want to be. If that makes me weak in the eyes of traditionalists, so be it. But it should not have to cost you your political power. Then what? The Emperor stopped pacing, his frustration evident. I do nothing while you live under constant threat? I pretend our friendship does not exist. Doyen thought about his years in the classroom, dealing with bullies and cliques and the casual cruelties children inflicted on each other. The solution was never to escalate, never to make the victim more visible. It was to change the culture itself. Make it about more than just me, Doyen said slowly. Make it about the principle. Not the Emperor is friends with a human janitor, but leaders should recognize worth regardless of status. Make it bigger than our specific friendship. Velkin considered this. A philosophical statement rather than a personal one. Exactly. You are not defending me specifically. You are advocating for a change in how all of galactic society views hierarchy and worth. And you think this will reduce the threat to you? No, Doyen admitted. It will probably increase it, at least initially. But it might also inspire others to think differently. To question their own assumptions about status and worth. The Emperor looked at him for a long moment. You are either very wise or very naive, Kong Doyen. Probably both, Your Majesty. The announcement came 2 days later. Emperor Velkin called a formal gathering in the Grand Concourse, the same hall where Doyen had first found Taemin crying over his shoes. Dignitaries from dozens of species attended, along with station personnel and media representatives. Doyen stood in his dress uniform, the one reserved for formal station occasions, trying not to fidget under the weight of so many stares. Beside him, looking small but determined, stood Prince Taemin. Velkin addressed the assembly in Galactic Common, his voice carrying through the vast space. I stand before you today to acknowledge a debt and to propose a change. Weeks ago, I discovered my son in distress and a human male, a station maintenance worker, was helping him. Not because he was ordered to, not because he expected reward, but simply because a child needed help. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Doyen saw some approving nods but more skeptical frowns. This act of simple kindness reminded me of something my empire has forgotten, Velkin continued. We have built our civilization on rigid hierarchies, on the belief that worth is determined by birth and status. We teach our children that there are those above them and those below them, that some beings are inherently more valuable than others. The murmurs grew louder. Several Velian nobles in the crowd looked uncomfortable. But I have learned something from my friendship with Kong Doyen. Worth is not inherited. Wisdom does not belong only to the highborn. Compassion is not the exclusive domain of the powerful. The Emperor's voice grew stronger. If we truly wish to build a better galactic civilization, we must recognize that every being has value regardless of their station. A group of Velian traditionalists near the front stood and walked out. The gesture was clear. They rejected the Emperor's words. Several other delegations followed, their disapproval evident. But others remained. Doyen saw young Velians watching with interest, saw members of species that had been treated as lesser by the galactic powers nodding in agreement. I do not ask you to abandon your traditions entirely, Velkin said. I ask only that you question whether those traditions serve their original purpose, or whether they have become chains that bind us to obsolete thinking. The Emperor gestured and Taemin stepped forward. The young prince walked to the center of the platform, his ceremonial robes perfect, his posture dignified. Then he knelt down and in front of the entire assembly he untied his shoes. Gasps echoed through the hall. A prince performing a servant's task in public. Taemin carefully retied his shoes, using the method Doyen had taught him. When he finished, he stood and spoke in Galactic Common, words he had clearly been practicing. My friend Kang Doyen taught me something important. He taught me that being a prince does not mean having others do everything for me. It means learning to do things myself so I can understand what I ask of others. It means seeing every person as worthy of dignity. The young prince looked directly at the camera recording the event. If a human janitor could see me as just a child who needed help, then maybe we should all try to see each other as just people who sometimes need help. The silence that followed was profound. Then from somewhere in the crowd someone began to clap. Then another. Then more. The applause spread, not universal but significant. Doyen felt his eyes burning. He had just wanted to help a crying child. He had never intended for it to become this. Velkin stepped forward again. I hereby establish the Equality Initiative, a program to examine our social hierarchies and their impact on opportunity and dignity. I invite any species, any individual who shares these concerns to join us. The backlash was immediate and severe. Within days, 3 major Velian noble houses formally withdrew their support from Velkin's rule. Several allied species questioned whether they wanted to continue their treaties with an empire that seemed to be abandoning its traditional values. But something else happened too. Young Velians, particularly those who had chafed under the strict hierarchies of their culture, began speaking out in support of their emperor's message. Other species that had been marginalized in galactic society saw an opportunity for change. The Equality Initiative received thousands of applications from beings across the galaxy who wanted to be part of something different. Doyen tried to return to his normal routine, but it was impossible. He was recognized everywhere, hailed by some as a symbol of progress, condemned by others as a disruptive influence. His supervisor Clix finally gave up trying to keep him out of trouble and just assigned him to maintenance duties that kept him away from political gathering spaces. But the visits to the royal quarters continued. If anything, they became more important, a small pocket of normalcy in an increasingly chaotic situation. I have been reading about Earth, Velkin said one evening over tea. Your species has gone through similar struggles, questioning hierarchies based on birth, wealth, skin color. You have fought wars over these ideas. We have, Doyen confirmed. We are still fighting them in some ways. Humans are not perfect. We still have prejudice, inequality, unfairness. But we are trying to do better. And you think we can do the same? That the galactic community can change? I think, Doyen said carefully, that change is always possible. It is just rarely easy or quick. Taemin, who had been quietly playing with a puzzle Doyen had brought him, looked up. Father, why are some people so angry about you being friends with Kang Doyen? Because change frightens them, son. They worry that if the old rules do not apply anymore, they will not know their place in the world. But is not that good? Figuring out your place instead of just being told what it is. Velkin smiled. Out of the mouths of children. Yes, Taemin. That is exactly right. 6 months after the famous speech, the Equality Initiative held its first major conference. Representatives from 47 species attended, along with scholars, activists, and ordinary citizens who wanted to be part of the conversation. Doyen was not officially part of the initiative. He was still just a janitor and he preferred it that way. But Velkin had insisted he attend the opening ceremony. You started this, the Emperor said. Whether you intended to or not, your simple act of kindness was the catalyst. You should see what it has become.